All right, hello. Welcome back. Today should be Friday in sixth grade social studies world cultures. So today we have another lesson video for you. We are going to be focusing here on Unit 2, Chapter 2, Lessons 1 and 2, kind of a little mix-up here, or mashing together. We're going to be focusing on planet Earth, how the Earth changes, so a changing Earth, and the water cycle. So up here, you'll see the objective slide. So if you're not familiar with the objective slides, there is a today I will, a so I can, and I know I have it when statements and these three objectives, or these objectives basically answer the three questions of what am I doing today? Why am I doing it? And how do I know I've learned anything? Okay, so it helps to also say it along with me as we read these. Okay, so today I will learn about Earth and how it's constantly changing. That's what we're doing. So I can understand how Earth's constant change affects life on it. That's the why. I know I have it when I'm able to explain to my friends and family about Earth and how it is ever changing, which has an impact on life itself. Okay, so that is going to be the how I know something was learned today from the lesson. Okay, or how I learned something from the lesson, and you did as well. So now, this page is going to be, or the slide is going to be the vocab page. So you will see at the top, we have our academic vocab, accurate, intent, and transform. Remember, academic vocabulary is, they're very important words that you're not just going to see in social studies. We're also going to see them across other subjects as well, such as math, science, and English. At the bottom here, we have our constant vocabulary: orbit, axis, revolution, atmosphere, solstice, equinox, climate, tectonic plates, fault, earthquake, tsunami, water cycle, evaporation, condensation, and acid rain. So the concept vocab here at the bottom, these words are going to be vocab words specific to social studies, okay? You're pretty much only gonna see these in the social studies course, okay? Next, we have the topics for today's lesson. The sort of important big topics here are in red: planet Earth, a changing Earth for the second one, and the third one is a water cycle, or the water cycle. And underneath each of those red topics here, we have our subtopics. So first, layers and physical systems, seasons and climate underneath planet Earth. And then under a changing Earth, we're going to be talking about Earth's surface, weather and erosion, and human actions. And finally, in the water cycle, we'll be talking about the cycle of balance, water's changing forms, and human influence on the water cycle. Okay, so first topic, we're gonna start with a guiding question for planet Earth. What is the structure of Earth and what causes its seasons and climate? Okay, so the guiding question is basically just sort of like a purpose question, okay? It's something that gives us a purpose for what we should be learning. You know, we're gonna be able to answer this question once we finish through this topic here, planet Earth, right? So I'm gonna get a little, you know, kind of astronomical, a little scientific here for the beginning. So Earth and the sun. Earth orbits or moves around the sun. And again, you'll see here that it's highlighted in yellow. That is a concept vocab word. So as Earth orbits the sun, it rotates or it spins on its axis, okay? So here you can see in the picture, the yellow circle here is it's signifying, showing how the Earth turns on its axis, okay? And then the large blue circle here you'll see is the movement that the Earth itself, how it revolves around the sun. All right, down here. So axis, again, a concept vocab word, just means an imaginary line that runs through Earth's center from the North Pole to the South Pole. Okay, so again, imagine an orange. We just love to use, I guess, oranges here in social studies to imagine the globe, Earth. So imagine an orange, and let's say that you take a pencil and you stick it perfectly, pencil or stick, you stick it perfectly through the center of the orange, okay, and it just kind of, you just kind of have a pencil there with an orange on it. So if you stuck the pencil straight through and it's perfectly in the center of the orange, then that pencil would represent the Earth's axis, okay? Obviously, Earth doesn't have a giant stick or something sticking through it, okay? It's just an imaginary line that helps us to picture what exactly Earth is rotating around, okay? And again, that stretches from, or that imaginary line stretches from the North Pole to the South Pole. Earth completes one rotation every 24 hours, or as you probably know, that is a day. So every time Earth just does a little spin here, whoop, that is a day, okay? That is what we experience as a day. Now, Earth makes one revolution, or a complete trip around the sun, every 365 and a quarter days, which is what we call a calendar year. Okay, so again, right here, if we're starting here where my cursor is, Earth just does a little whoop, just a little spin on its own axis. That is a day, 24 hours. But on the blue line, okay, so as Earth is, remember again, it's spinning on its axis, so a whole bunch of days. So it's basically spinning 365 times around all the way until, boom, it reaches back to its original point here in the picture. That would be considered one calendar year, okay? So real quickly in chat before y'all move on, just want to kind of see what you all think, you know, kind of using your brains here, and maybe even recalling what you think is so significant about there being a quarter of a day here. Okay, so there's 365 days in a year, usually, but that's what we picture a year as. But there's also just a little bit of time, a little bit left over, about a quarter of a day. Okay, so how is that significant? What do we do exactly in our calendar that, you know, accounts for that quarter of a day? So just kind of see or type in the chat what you think that might be. Moving on. Okay, so this is the point in the presentation where your teacher is going to, so whoever your teacher might be, is going to pause the video, and we're going to switch over to the Earth's Layers video over in the McGraw-Hill tab, okay? Okay, so we're back. We just saw the Earth's layers. Now we're going to be focusing on the physical systems, so Earth's physical systems that reside on top of its outermost layer, the crust. So we have 4 spheres here, all right? So we have the hydrosphere, water. That'd probably be over here in this picture, right here. The lithosphere, which is the land or Earth's crust, so that would be pictured here in this circle, the picture. Atmosphere, which is the air or the gases that reside on top of the Earth. That's pictured by the clouds here. And then finally, the biosphere, which just means life. Okay, I believe Mr. Randall might have gone over that in an earlier video where bio is basically means life. So whenever you see a word that has the word bio in it, that word is probably gonna have something to do with life, like biology, the study of life. And that is signified with this picture here of some people, plants in the background, bird, and a tiger, okay? All living things in that picture. Now, so you might be thinking, it seems kind of a, you know, a lot of, you know, things to remember here about all of its physical systems, but hey, there's actually an easy way to remember this, all right? So if you've ever watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, okay, you might be familiar with the 4 nations. So you probably would just want to associate Earth's, you know, different spheres of the physical systems on top of the crust. Just associate these spheres here with the 4 nations, okay? We have the water nation here, which is the, you know, hydrosphere. We have the earth nation, which would be the lithosphere. We have the, you know, like the air nomads, you know, like what Aang is. That would be the atmosphere for the air nomads. And then finally, you would have, this one's a little bit kind of trickier here. So fire, obviously this picture, the biosphere isn't really going to signify fire itself, but you just want to imagine life itself or fire itself as being alive, you know, with the way its movements are pretty erratic. So it's almost like it is actually alive. So just think, oh, Fire Nation, fire is alive, biosphere, because bio equals life, okay? So biosphere life, it's like the Fire Nation. Fire is pretty much alive, okay? Not actually, but it looks like it's alive with its crazy movements. Okay, next, this is the part of the video. So another part of the video where the teacher is going to pause and they're going to switch over to Earth's daily rotation and seasons videos in the McGraw-Hill website. Okay, so we should have already seen those 2 videos here. They should have been hopefully not too long. Now we're getting into Earth's climates. Okay, so the first one here is going to be, or the first bullet point here is going to be climate, of concept vocab word. So climate is just the average weather conditions in a region or area over a longer period. Okay, guys, remember that weather is the state of the atmosphere at any given time. Okay, so so right now looks pretty sunny, a little bit of cloudiness out there. Okay, so at this point of just like me seeing this here, this would be what I consider the weather. Okay, and your weather app shows you and, you know, even updates you on what the weather is at any given time. Okay, but that's weather. Climate, you can think of it more so as how is the weather over a longer period of time, maybe like a month or even 6 months, maybe even a year. How is the weather over a long period of time or a longer period of time? Okay, that would be what climate is, the average weather conditions in an area over a period of time. Next, we have the 6 climate zones. So we have tropical climate zones, so places that tend to be pretty hot, rainy, have a lot of dense forests. Think like like the Amazon jungle. Those would be tropical climate zones. Next, we have deserts. Okay, dry. We know this. They can be cold or hot. Crazy thought, I know. Most of the time, whenever we think of desert, we think of a hot area, but there are actually places near the north where they are actually very dry, but they're actually quite cold. Humid temperate. So temperate just means kind of like in the middle. This just means that there's all types of weather, and there tends to be kind of a huge variation in the changing seasons, or with the changing seasons. Next is cold temperate. So kind of like humid temperate, except they tend to have shorter summers in these types of zones, and it tends to be colder and windier. So, pretty much just like humid temperate, except it's, more on the colder side, okay? Polar climate zones, very, very cold. Just any place you see where it's like ice and snowy year round, like in photos, Antarctica, those sorts of places, that's pretty much going to be a polar region, okay? Or like, the Siberia in Russia. Next is going to be the high mountain climates or climate zones. Okay, so these are only found on high mountain ranges, and they tend to have variable conditions because of the increased elevation. Kind of does some weird stuff with the with climate, but for the most part, they are quite cold. Okay, here in the image, it might be just slightly. It's just slightly different than what's over here in the climate zones, because so we still have tropical. We still have the arid, just means desert, dry. We have polar. We have the high mountain zones here. But you'll notice that there is another slide here that's not on these 6 over here in the bullet points. That's called Mediterranean. It's pretty much, I would say it's pretty much like a humid temperate, okay? And then obviously you have the green for temperate over here. So they kind of split up like Mediterranean, then like cold and the humid temperates. But for the most part, these are going to be the 6 climate zones that most scientists agree, are the case. Okay. Moving on. So factors that influence climate. Okay. So you have elevation. Kind of went over that just briefly. So the atmosphere thins as the altitude, or as things get higher up towards the atmosphere. As that increases, the air gets thinner. Okay. So it's, I don't know if y'all have ever gone hiking in the mountains, but if you get higher and higher up in the peak, the air becomes thinner, and it actually becomes a little bit harder to breathe because it's not holding as much oxygen. Because the air is thinner, that means it retains less heat, and that tends to be why it tends to be a lot colder up in the mountains where it's high elevation. Wind and ocean currents. Okay, so so the wind and the ocean, they help circulate the sun's heat around the Earth. Okay, so warm, obviously the sun's rays hit near the equator, so the center of the Earth. Pretty much year round, that creates pretty humid winds, and those winds tend to rise up. Colder winds kind of swoop inward, and it just creates what we call winds, and those go around the planet, and that spreads the heat of the sun. As for the ocean, kind of similar, but obviously in a different state. It's liquid, it's water. So the sun's rays are heating up water near the equator, so the tropics is what we call that area around the equator. The hot water from the ocean being heated up by the sun's rays, that's actually going to move away from the equator. It's going to go more towards the colder regions, and then in turn, the colder waters are going to be flowing towards the equator. So kind of like a little cycle there, okay? Because if from science, you might have learned about how heat works. So for the most part, and pretty much, it's a thermodynamic law that heat always transfers from what is hottest or what is hotter to what is colder. Okay, you touch an ice cube. It's not so much that the coldness of the ice cube is going into your hand. It's more so that the heat of your hand is going into the ice cube, and you're losing the heat, and that's why it feels so jarring. It's like your heat is just being sucked out so rapidly that it has that very freezing feeling to it. Okay. Same thing with the wind and ocean currents. Okay, heat tends to move towards, or does in fact move towards, cooler areas. Next is the sun. So the sun, again, kind of discussed already. So directly, or shines its rays directly year-round at low altitudes near the equator. Okay, so the climate tends to be very hot. That's why we call it the tropics. All right, so tropical regions tend to be very hot because they're near the equator. where the sun tends to shine a lot. High latitude regions do not see as much sunlight. Okay, so remember we know that the equator has a lot of the sun's rays, so it's like the sun is directly hitting the equator for most of the year. But obviously the Earth is a little bit slanted, and then the sun's rays are not going to be hitting the Earth more near the the poles, so away from the equator. So it's going to be a little bit colder, and because of the slant of Earth, the sun's rays are actually going to kind of hit it at an awkward angle. So a lot of the areas around the top of the globe and even the bottom of the globe, they tend to not see as much of that sunlight, and therefore their climate tends to be almost always cold. Okay, so a changing Earth is going to be our next big topic here. So the guiding question for this topic is going to be, how is Earth's surface formed and what impact do humans have on it? Okay, we'll be able to answer this question once we get through the subtopics. Okay, Earth's surface. So Earth's crust is made up of about 16 enormous pieces called tectonic plates. You can actually see that here in the image. These lines here are not countries. They are actually the tectonic plates that reside or that make up the Earth and its crust. Okay, so obviously when you see these aren't like walls you can actually go out to see. These are actually in the ground, and these are kind of like the fault lines where scientists have mapped them out. So these plates vary in size and shape, as well as the amount they move over the mantle below them. Okay, remember Earth's layers, under the crust is the liquid mantle, and heat from inside the Earth causes these tectonic plates to move. However, they're so slow, they move so slowly that humans, we hardly experience them, okay, except in special circumstances. So over millions and millions of years, okay, or let's take it a little smaller. So maybe over a year, a tectonic plate might move maybe like half an inch, if even that. Okay, so it takes millions and millions of years to even create landforms that we're familiar with today. Okay, such as if these tectonic plates are pushing against each other, over long periods of time, eventually they're going to start creating mountains, volcanoes, even deep ocean trenches. Plates that end up getting smashing and crushed together over time, they might break apart and create jagged mountain ranges. And then finally, plates that end up actually moving apart, so doing the opposite of what I've been saying, they move apart on the ocean floor, they create giant cracks in the Earth's crust where magma flows out, magma like lava flows out, which ends up creating islands, okay? And so sudden changes to Earth's surface can also happen, all right? So faults, it just basically results whenever rocks on one side or both sides of Earth's crust have been moved by forces within the Earth. So whenever there's actually some cutaways that you can actually look up online where people are standing in front of you can see the layers of the Earth, but then it's kind of cut away. But if you see those layers kind of go like that, and it's the layers kind of have this kind of awkward slant to them, that is what you would call a fault. It's basically a kind of a shifting of Earth's crust there that we can see. That would be an actual visible one, but most of the time, we really can't really see them with our naked eye. Earthquakes are actually caused, okay, by movement along these fault lines. Okay, so remember how I said that tectonic plates move very slowly? Okay, but there are times where Earth gets a little finicky, and it might kind of shudder a little bit more violently than normal. So whenever that happens along those fault lines, that's what tends to result in very powerful energy surges called earthquakes. So these intense vibrations caused by earthquakes and erupting volcanoes, can transfer the energy to Earth's surface. And if that energy travels through the ocean, it can cause massive waves to form that are called tsunamis. Okay, kind of a strange spelling there. So that's actually not an English word, that is a Japanese word, which is why the spelling is a little strange, where we don't actually pronounce the T. Okay. Moving on, we have weathering and erosion. So y'all should be familiar with this, especially if you've gone through the science unit with rocks. Weathering is the process by which Earth's surface is worn away by wind, rain, chemicals, or the movement of ice, water, and even plants. You may have seen this on old buildings or even statues. Okay, so if you go to a museum or a statue that people are able to physically touch, you'll notice that The statue might be chipped or whatever in some places. Some parts of the statue might be kind of like where people are constantly, rubbing their, natural oils on it. It's kind of a worn away. That would be an example of weathering. Okay, so just whenever things get worn down. All right. Erosion is the process by which weathered bits of this rock or any other material are moved elsewhere by water, wind, or ice. Okay, so erosion has actually caused the formation of the Grand Canyon. Okay, so erosion buildup creates landforms like beaches, islands, and plains. So weathering and erosion do work together to change the surface features of Earth. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, they kind of sound pretty similar. Like, wouldn't I get mixed up here? And to be fair, yes, if you don't know how to differentiate them or tell them apart, yes, they can be, you can maybe mix up their definitions, okay? But an easy way to think about this is weathering is the process by which the thing breaks apart. Okay, so let's say like a rock. Weathering is a process by which that rock breaks apart. Erosion, okay, is a process by which those broken pieces move, okay, and move along and might even go and interfere with other landforms, okay? So weathering is the process of the breakdown. Erosion is basically the moving of those weathered bits, okay? So it's almost like weathering happens first and then erosion ends up happening second because it ends up carrying those weathered pieces, right? Human actions, okay? So human actions and discoveries have also changed the Earth in several ways, as you all probably know. So so we have awesome discoveries and improved tech, maybe when it comes to coal mining. So we're able to, harvest coal to use for our machines like trains, back when, coal trains were a big thing. However, that does tend to result in entire mountains being, leveled or, taken down due to constant coal mining. Okay, so if you're constantly inside of a mountain, taking all of its, coals, rocks, then that mountain can't really sustain itself, and it's probably not going to be able to stand for very long. And then it ends up, just probably crashing down, and we lose that mountain, we lose that landform. Next bullet point here. So we use dynamite to blast tunnels through mountain ranges, okay, which you can actually see here in this image of, there's appears to be a road or highway going through this, what looks to be a mountain or a very large hill. So we blast tunnels with dynamite through mountain ranges. And it is helpful for us because it helps create highways and railroads, but it does also, damage the landform. It changes it dramatically. Third bullet point here, building canals, okay, changes the natural course of waterways. So again, we build those canals to help us maybe settle a little bit better or maybe utilize the water a little bit better for our own personal gain. But a lot of times maybe canals probably aren't the greatest for the surrounding environment. Okay, we're kind of messing with the natural way that water is flowing. And finally, this last bullet point here, so cutting down forests, I'm sure this is the one that y'all are probably most familiar with whenever it comes to environmental concerns, deforestation. Okay, so we cut down all these acres and acres of forests in order to use the resources that we can gather, such as wood or plant fibers. This is very problematic, not just because you're destroying the ecosystems, the life and systems that live in those forests, but we're also creating deadly landslides and terrible erosion. Okay, so that's basically where, sorry, my nose keeps itching. So landslides and erosion that ends up, causing massive amounts of dirt to flow or fly into the sky and maybe even go towards people as a dust storm. That tends to happen because of deforestation. Since remember, plants, take a root in the ground. So it's almost like plants and trees with their roots, they can hold the ground together. Okay, so if we just destroy those plants, destroy those trees, deforestation, we take all those things down, like you can see here in the bottom screen or the bottom picture of the slide. That tends to loosen up the dirt. And if it's on if there's like trees or the forest is on like a slant or like a mountainside or a hillside, and we deforest or we tear down those trees on that hillside, then that's going to loosen up the soil and dirt there, and that can create landslides, which can be very, very dangerous, especially if there's like a village or housing at the bottom of that hill. Okay. So moving on to the third and final topic for today, which is going to be the water cycle. Okay, so the guiding question for this topic is going to be, what is the water cycle and how do we as humans affect it? So it's a cycle of balance, guys. Water is essential, okay, very important, to all life on Earth. So that includes animals, or humans, animals, and plants. Because of this, Earth needs a constant supply of fresh, clean water. Luckily, water is a natural resource that is recycled and renewed constantly. We call this the water cycle, which is just Earth's water recycling system. So the total amount of water is actually very interesting. The total amount of water has not changed since our planet formed billions of years ago because of this water cycle, because of this recycling of the water. So at all times, okay, even now as I'm speaking, water is moving over, it's moving under, it's moving above Earth's surface and changing forms, okay? This water cycle keeps Earth's water supply in balance, okay? So water, you know, if it's flowing correctly and it's changing properties correctly, then that means that it's, you know, it's going to be constantly renewing itself, okay? It's constantly changing, because if water is just staying there, it's not being recycled, in nature, we call that a stagnant body of water, okay? And a stagnant body of water tends to get very dirty, and it's just not, you know, things can't really live there, and we can't drink it, okay? So it's very important that water is constantly moving about and recycling itself. So water's changing forms. The next slide. Evaporation, very important water cycle vocabulary you need to know. Evaporation is a process where water changes into water vapor from its liquid state due to heat from the sun. Water in oceans, lakes, rivers, and swimming pools are constantly evaporating, as you can see here in the simple water cycle image. Even small amounts of water in soil, leaves, and even our breath is evaporating and going into the atmosphere all the time. Next part of the water cycle is going to be condensation. So condensation is a process where water vapor transforms, okay, changes into a denser liquid or solid state, okay, a thicker liquid or solid state, such as snow or ice. This happens whenever the water vapor, so after evaporation, it's, you know, rising up into the sky as clouds. So whenever water vapor rises and form these clouds, and the clouds become too saturated, they become, you know, a little bit too heavy with this water vapor, okay, because the water vapor is, you know, it's gathering together, it's condensing, and it's turning into actual, you know, water that we're familiar with, that we drink. Once that happens, then it falls from the clouds to the ground as precipitation, okay? It doesn't just have to be rain. Precipitation can also be sleet, snow, hail. As long as, if it's falling from a cloud, then we call it precipitation. So precipitation, liquid rainwater returns water to rivers, lakes, and oceans, okay? Also, it soaks into the ground, supplying moisture to plants and refilling underground water supplies such as wells or natural springs. A lot of this rainwater actually does end up filtering through the soils and rocks and trickles back into rivers, lakes, and oceans. So it's almost like it's cleaning itself as it's, you know, kind of moving through the earth and its soil and stuff, okay? Almost like its own like natural filter. So the cycle repeats all over the world, recycling water for all living organisms to survive again and again. So this is the simple, right, cursor went, okay, so this is the simple little image here of the water cycle. So condensation here with the clouds. So the water, you know, kind of thickens, and after the condensation, you know, happens, the water gets too heavy to sustain itself in the cloud, and then it falls as precipitation to the ground. Then it runs off into bodies of water. So it's like, you know, supplying plants, animals with the water as it's falling, but then it goes and collects into some sort of a body of water, such as a lake. Then the sun's rays heat up that lake, and then that water evaporates. And then there actually should be another arrow over here. Actually, you can just draw that right quick. Okay, so there should be an arrow over here. So after it evaporates, the water that is evaporated should go over here to this cloud, and then it condenses into clouds. And then the whole process is like this big circle, okay? Recycling. Let me go ahead and clear those drawings. Okay, so moving on. This next slide is going to be kind of like a more in-depth version of it. Basically, same thing. The big three things you need to know about the water cycle are evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Those are like the big main three things here, okay? Water evaporates from lakes and oceans because of the sun. It forms clouds, and then they end up condensing. And then once they get very heavy, then they fall to the ground as precipitation, okay? Rain, rain, snow, sleet, hail. Then the water that falls from precipitation kind of does like a little runoff, like it starts, flowing down to, plants, the earth, ground, ends up going into groundwater, and that groundwater ends up flowing back into the lakes, rivers, oceans, and then the whole process just repeats itself again and again. All right, and then human influence. So unfortunately, humans, we haven't done much to help the world's water supply. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We've actually done a whole lot of damage to, or we tend to do a lot of damage still to Earth's water supply. So waste from factories and toxic chemicals, such as up here. So waste up here from a factory running off into a body of water, and toxic chemicals such as Roundup. Yep. So the weed killer that your parents might keep in the garage, Roundup. I mean, I'm guilty too. Yes, it's really awesome for quickly killing weeds on your lawn, but it also is very, very toxic. Okay, so there's actually been problems where people use this and it's run off in the groundwater and actually ends up poisoning the water supply. So you want to be very careful of that. Okay, so these pollute rivers, lakes, oceans, and groundwater. Chemicals like pesticides and fertilizers seep into wells that hold drinking water, poisoning it and causing disease. Okay, just like what I said about the Roundup. And then some fuels we burn actually release poisonous gases into the atmosphere, where they combine with water vapor in the air, and they create these toxic acids, which then fall to Earth as a special type of a dangerous type of precipitation called acid rain. Okay, which is highlighted in yellow here. So acid rain pollutes drinking water, it damages trees and plants, and it kills aquatic life. Okay, it's like pretty much like acid falling down and doing damage to all these things. And this photo over here is actually pretty interesting because it shows a statue that's actually been affected very badly by acid rain falling on it. Okay, so you can actually see that there's cracks and it's crumbling more so than an actual statue would from normal natural weathering, because the acid rain is what we call caustic. Okay, caustic means that something is able to burn something else through chemical reactions, okay? Because acid rain is made up of very toxic chemicals, and those toxic chemicals have almost, you want to say, burned away at the face of the statue. So pretty scary stuff. We got to be a little more careful about how we are affecting our natural water resources as humans. Okay, so that brings us to our final slide, going over the objectives of what we should have accomplished today. So today, I will learn about Earth and how it's constantly changing. Okay, we did that. That was the what that we did. So I can understand how Earth's constant change affects life on it. That was our why. We went through that. And finally, I know I have it when I'm able to explain to my friends and family about Earth and how it is ever changing. Okay, with the shifting landforms, changing weather, cycling water, etc., which all has an impact on life, living things on Earth itself. Okay, and hopefully you're able to deliver that information to friends and family members that you may know. Okay, so that is our last slide. That is going to conclude this presentation. I hope you all learned something. I hope it was helpful to you, and I will see you all next week with our presentation videos. Take care.